U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry travels to Cuba Friday to raise the U.S. flag and formally reopen the U.S. Embassy there. Diego Moya-Ocampos, Senior Latin American Analyst for IHS, joins me now from London. Diego, Secretary Kerry's trip is another step toward the normalization of relations between the U.S. and Cuba. What will be accomplished by that trip, or is it more symbolic?
No, certainly it's a solid step towards increased trade and investment between the U.S. and Cuba. However, we have to say that trade and investment will continue being constrained by the U.S. embargo, so most sanctions will continue being in place. However, top-level diplomatic representation is indeed a solid step towards increased trade and investment, without a doubt.
Now, in terms of the U.S. sanctions, you don't think Congress will lift them before 2018. Why is that?
Well, basically because as long as Republicans control the Congress, this is something that is unlikely to happen. And it's unlikely to happen because President Raoul Castro is unlikely to step down before 2018. And also because despite the appointment of top-level diplomatic representation, we're not seeing any clear sign from the Cuban side of moving forward towards democratization or respecting dissidents' human rights. On the opposite, what we're clearly seeing is a crackdown on dissidents and still no sign for that. Now, it is very important to say that next year in April, there's going to be the Congress of the Communist Party, where political reform is being debated. Whatever gets out from that certainly will be more plural, but will not necessarily be a democratic political reform, which some Cubans on the ground are demanding. We have to remember that 5 years ago, in the previous Communist Party Congress, the new guidelines, the new economic guidelines, which have driven this reform, which is leading to the resumption of relations to a certain extent, were approved. So we cannot underestimate, the potential for that Congress. But so far, we're not seeing any signs of that. So we cannot think that there's grounds for the U.S. Congress to lift the embargo at this stage.
Ultimately, how much trade and investment do you see from the U.S. to Cuba?
Well, basically what we're seeing is that the appointment of top-level diplomatic representation and the recent removal of Cuba from the U.S. list of states which sponsor terrorism basically gives more room to Obama's administration to grant more licenses to the OFAC, to the Treasury, and to the Department of Commerce for companies, but only those companies operating under the framework of aid, humanitarian, and educational issues. So under that framework, there's a lot of room for things to improve. For example, we can see licenses being granted for the food sector, for medicines, medical supplies, for maritime and aerial transport, which could favor, for example, cruises, which have a sort of educational, cultural component regarding Cuba. And of course, we're going to see the financial sector also profiting from this, because basically they were going to be the ones which are going to bring support to this type of operation. So basically, in terms of trade and investment, what we're seeing is that there's potential for the food sector to improve, tourism probably, and of course, cargo and the financial services as well.
Sorry, we're out of time. We're going to end it there. I thank you so much, though. Appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm Rhonda Schaffler for The Street.